Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick Kennedy. I'm Sacramento County Supervisor representing District 2 and part of the illustrious 4x2 as the reason that we're here today. I want to thank you all for joining us on this very important day. I'm happy to join my board colleague, Rich Desmond, as well as my colleagues from the City of Sacramento to announce that we've agreed to a long overdue partnership between the city and the county that, if approved by both the City Council and the Board of Supervisors, will improve the coordination efforts of the city and the county for homeless people in our area to be more cooperative and more coordinated than it ever has before. Now, the majority of those that are homeless in the Sacramento County area live in the City of Sacramento. This agreement goes a long way toward bringing us closer to working more effectively with our city partners. We've recognized the need to address the challenges ahead with our city partners for quite some time, and not just for those that we provide services to, but for our community members and our businesses. In recent years, the county has made significant investments to expand services to our unhoused neighbors. However, we recognize the need to do more, as the increase in homelessness has outpaced the services we offer. As the key behavioral health and social service provider for all county residents, the county has taken a closer look at what services we provide and how we deliver those services to those in need. With that, I'll detail some important points of this historic agreement. The agreement, as I said, must be approved by the City Council and the Board of Supervisors. It has been placed on the December 6th agenda of both the city and the county for approval. The agreement states that the county will fund 10 behavioral health workers for encampment outreach and support in the City of Sacramento. A new behavioral health center within the City of Sacramento, which will bring the total in the city to 4. The expansion of behavioral health services to meet the needs of those who are unhoused, including increasing our full-service partnership capacity if that's necessary. The Crisis Receiving Behavioral Health Center, operated by WellSpace, a partner of Sacramento County, to help those in mental health crisis or under the influence of alcohol and/or drugs. Expansions of substance use disorder residential treatment beds, something that we have needed for a very long time and will be a real game changer. Expansion of efforts such as Laura's Law to help those who don't seek voluntary care. The addition of 200 new shelter beds within 12 months and an additional 200 beds within 36 months in the unincorporated area, and 200 additional shelter beds in the city's jurisdiction, provided the city provides a shovel-ready site. Additionally, our Medi-Cal managed care partners, Anthem, HealthNet, Kaiser, Molina, and Aetna, have contributed funding to provide for 15 homeless engagement workers to help link individuals to benefits under CalAIM, including enhanced care management and community supports. It's important to note that all of this will not happen overnight. But please, mark my words, a new day has come. And we're excited about about the cooperation and coordination and what it will bring to help those who need us the most, as well as providing services and support for neighborhoods and businesses. Now, before I turn the mic over to my good friend, Mayor Steinberg, I'd like to thank city and county staff for the work that they have done to bring ideas and solutions to the table for our consideration. In particular, I would like to thank our county executive, Ann Edwards, and our deputy county executive for social services, Siobhan Katari, for their tireless efforts working toward the solution. Without that, this would not have become. Finally, I'd like to thank the best partner I could have had in this whole endeavor, and that's my friend and colleague, Supervisor Rich Desmond. Now with that, I now welcome Mayor Steinberg to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Kennedy. I cannot stop smiling. A genuine smile that we have reached this day and that we are standing together. I want to begin with some thank yous as well. I want to start with my city partners, my colleagues, two of whom are here today who participated actively in these very important negotiations. Council members Jeff Harris, Eric Guetta, and Council member Jay Chenier, who couldn't be here today. I want to thank our great city manager, Howard Chan, for his unending work on creating this collaborative relationship and agreement with the County of Sacramento, as well as Mario Lada, who helped lead the negotiations. Thank you. Our city attorney and her team, Susanna Alcala. I want to thank my personal staff, Marilyn Valinga, who's worked so hard on this with me. And of course, he's standing in the back there, Judge Lloyd Connolly, who knows the county world very, very well, and the state world and the city world, and worked as a volunteer in my office for almost 12 months as all of this journey was on its way, and helped put this together. Grateful to you. I want to thank the business community. I don't know if they're here, but the Chamber of Commerce and Region Business for their work, their pressure in ways that helped bring us to this day. I want to thank Sacramento ACT. It's long been calling for a city-county partnership agreement. I want to thank the providers. Aaron, you're here, and so many others who have been in this field for a long time and have waited for this moment. I want to thank our neighborhoods and our business organizations who have been demanding change. And I have not forgotten anybody, believe me, because now I want to extend my heartfelt thank you to the County of Sacramento, where we gather here today. Supervisors Kennedy and Desmond, you have done great work, and I'm grateful to both of you. Ann Edwards and Siobhan Qatari deserve tremendous amount of credit, as Supervisor Kennedy stated, for being creative and being willing. This county council and all who participated on the county side. It is no secret that the city and county have had our challenges together over the years. The journey that has brought us here today has not been easy. So I want to state loudly and clearly the following. With this agreement, the county is stepping up big time. They are taking a step that is bold, that is far-reaching, and that provides the best chance we've had together to impact this terrible problem that dominates the agendas of every major city and county in our state. The agreement that both sides, as Supervisor Kennedy said, will approve next Tuesday is comprehensive, it is detailed, and it is groundbreaking. Supervisor Kennedy covered a significant amount of the detail, and I know some of my colleagues will fill in the gaps, but here are the highlights from my perspective in the way that I say it. The city and county and the health plans, contracting with the counties, they're a key piece of this through the state, what's known as the state CalAIM reform, will add 50 outreach workers to aggressively intervene in the most problematic encampments in the city of Sacramento. 10 teams will be responsible for working 20 separate encampments per month in the city. That's not some little pilot. That's 20 encampments per month. Each team will have a clinically trained mental health worker funded by the counties with the authority to diagnose people with mental health and substance abuse issues on the spot and in the encampments themselves. The teams will also include housing navigators and peer specialists and the DCR representatives from the City of Sacramento. The size of the teams will vary with the size of and complexity of the particular encampment. For large encampments, the teams will spend whatever number of days or weeks are necessary to navigate people out into better conditions. Now, assertive outreach is a cornerstone of this agreement. Assertive community outreach. It's essential, but it is not enough. For several years, as you know, I have advocated both in Sacramento and in California for a legal right to housing, shelter, and care for people in the most desperate need. This agreement is the first of its kind, a voluntary legal agreement which requires the city and county to work together. Not just one side, but both sides to work together. Maybe more importantly, it will guarantee whatever it takes for the people in desperate need. Mental health services, substance abuse services, housing services, general assistance, whatever it takes will be guaranteed to help get people off the streets. Under the agreement, the services to be offered are first voluntary, and if necessary, the county agrees to invoke Laura's Law or other legal tools to require the individual to accept the help. Under the agreement, the county is also bravely committing to adding as many of what are called full-service partnerships under Prop 63, the Mental Health Services Act, which is the highest level of service for people with the most severe needs. The city will work with the county, and the city will ultimately prioritize the sites. 20 a month once the teams are fully staffed over the next 6 months. But here's the among many important things, another important thing to say to the public. We together are not waiting. The city and county have been actually working together on a pilot basis for several months. So they are ready to go, even as we ramp up the 10 full teams. Next week, we will have 2 city-county teams, including a county behavioral health worker, going out to work with people in some of the encampments the city has deemed to pose the greatest and highest risk to health and safety. These include the X Street corridor and 29th and 30th Streets from E to H Streets in the Central City and Hagenwood Park, Traction Avenue, and Colfax in North Sacramento. And that's the beginning. Then we will keep going together. The health and housing centered agreements, I want to make clear, do not preclude humane enforcement, because I know that's a question that's going to come up. What does that mean? Well, in these encampments on the front end, where there are people who are engaging in illegal activity, who are preying on other people by selling drugs, by engaging in assault or whatever, there's a role for law enforcement on either the city or county side, I suppose the city police function, to enforce the law. And then once this exhaustive health and human services centered approach is completed, and again, voluntary and involuntary services, after however long it takes that is aggressive but reasonable, then the city and county together will decide, okay, what happens if an encampment remains? But the goal here is to make sure that many of these encampments don't remain the way they are, because we've actually helped navigate people off the street. 2 more points, and then I will cede the stage here. Implementation is everything, which is why I'm so pleased that the city and county not only worked so hard to forge this agreement, but have worked just as hard to begin planning for and actually operationalizing implementation. In fact, as late as this morning, meeting to figure out what those first interventions and where they will be. Because we all know that a written agreement, no matter how strong it is only as strong as the will to implement it in the right way. So we're going to continue the spirit and the work that we have done together to make sure that 20 a month, that gets you to hundreds of encampments potentially if we continue and as we build these teams. Last point, in conclusion, no single agreement will miraculously solve this problem, under no illusions. Done this long enough. On the other hand, no one can make progress acting alone. And that's sort of the way that it has been. I mean, despite a lot of good efforts, that's the way it's sort of been, and it's led to frustration from the public. But as Patrick said, it is a new day. It's a new day. It's a great day. It's a historic day. Let's get started together. I'm really happy. Thank you very much, everybody. Let me now turn it over to Sacramento County Rich Desmond, who really, along with Patrick, did a great job here, representing only a tiny sliver of the city, by the way. There he was, meeting after meeting, helping do this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Steinberg, and thank all of you for being here today. I'll be brief. I was mentally cutting a lot of lines from my remarks here today, just so I'm not additive of the great words of my colleague and friend Supervisor Kennedy and Mayor Steinberg. But I will say, this is by no means the end. It's no means the beginning of the end, or even the end of the beginning. But this is a big step forward in Sacramento County, and I'm very proud to be here today. Very proud of the City Council, Board of Supervisors, pending approval by our collective bodies, of course, next week. But I'm proud to stand up here today with my colleagues. I want to talk about something. There's been a lot of focus on Measure O and how Measure O was the impetus for this happening. But I got to say, the efforts to forge this partnership far predate Measure O, beginning of last year. And Supervisor Kennedy and I were on the initial version of, it's now a 2x4, it was a 2x2. But I think we started down that road in an acknowledgement that, look, neither of us can do this alone. Homelessness is not a crisis that respects jurisdictional boundaries. It doesn't begin or end at a city or county line, but it requires coordination and collaboration. And so we stuck it out. We had a few fits and starts and reconstituted this effort as a 2x4. But I think the time it took to do this and those efforts also illustrate the complexity of our homelessness crisis, not just in terms of the causes of homelessness, not just in terms of the things it's going to take to solve this crisis, but in terms of sometimes the lack of clarity around roles and responsibilities in the state of California. And that was something we really struggled with throughout the course of some of these negotiations. These roles and responsibilities are not always clearly defined in state law. And I tell you, Sacramento County is not the only city and county where you're seeing them wrestle with this issue. But we are the first to come up with an agreement like this. And I think this is something that we as elected officials and certainly as a community should be proud of, because we said we are going to define those roles and responsibilities in this agreement. It embodies our mutual desire to obviously improve the lives of people out on our streets through more services, more programs, with an ultimate goal to get everybody into stable housing. And I think there's been a lot of talk about the communities, the impact on the communities that this is going to have. I'm someone who, I think everybody up here with me shares this, that as an elected official, we have a dual responsibility. We have a responsibility to those who are suffering with untreated mental illness and addiction and homelessness, where they're subject to the elements out on our streets and open spaces. We have an obligation to get them the help they need. But we also have a dual obligation to our communities, our neighborhoods, our businesses. And I think this agreement, I'm very confident that this agreement is going to help us meet both of those obligations. We will help and shelter more people while allowing us to clean up our streets and open spaces. We all want a Sacramento where everybody is healthy, safe, and comfortable. And I think this is a big step in that direction. So I will finish now by doing my own thanks to a few people. It's funny that those of us in the room, the 2x4 and of course the county and city executive leaders, they were doing the lion's share of the work, but there's so many other so many others who were involved in this, pushing it along. I was going to call out Judge Lloyd Connolly myself, because I tell you, sometimes his diplomacy was desperately needed to keep us on the rails here, and he was doing a lot of that shovel diplomacy. So thank you, Lloyd Connolly, for that. But I'll just start with my friends and colleagues at the city, who I think I've built a good relationship with through the course of this difficult time. The city manager, Howard Chan, Mario Lara, thank you for all of your efforts. And of course, my friends, Mayor Steinberg, Eric Garab, Jeff Harris, my very good friend, who I'm sad to see go, and Jay Chenier. And then on the county side, certainly Ann Edwards, our county executive, who has been a wonderful leader in this effort, and Siobhan Katari, our deputy county exec over Health and Human Services, who, in my opinion, is just a rock star. We are so lucky to have her. And finally, just thank my friend, dear friend and colleague, Patrick Kennedy, and his leadership in keeping this going. And he has spent a lot of time kind of helping me understand a lot of the complexities of this crisis, because he's been in this game a lot longer than me. So thank you, Patrick, for that. And thank all of you for being here today. And let's get to work and really maximize the effectiveness of this partnership agreement. And with that, I will turn it over to, Eric Garrett.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Desmond. I want to start off by again saying that no one city, no one jurisdiction, no one county can address the biggest challenge that faces us all across the state. And the fact that we were able to do this here today, a legally binding partnership agreement. I want to thank Supervisor Desmond and Supervisor Kennedy and all of our county staff. Particularly because Supervisor Desmond also represents Council District 6, and I want to thank also Judge Lloyd Connolly, who was former council member of District 6. So thank you for that that work there. I'll start with my thanks as well. I do want to thank again my colleagues, Councilmember Jeff Harris, who's leaving us, Mayor Steinberg, and Councilmember Jay Chenier, who's not here, who all said. From the beginning, regardless of whether Measure O passes or fails, we know that the success of any outcome will be our ability to work together and using a legally binding partnership agreement where we are all committed to how our staff work together, what the outcomes look like, how we communicate, and how we provide relief and support for those who are experiencing homelessness and need mental health support and services, and how we support not only our businesses, but most importantly our neighborhoods who are asking for a significant change. I want to thank on our city side who helped us a lot on this. Mario Lara, thank you for your support and for your creativity in working with our county partners, and also our city attorney Susana Alcala Wood, who also with our county council helped us be very honest and direct about what needs to be in a legally binding partnership agreement, so that the outcome is effective, so that it's not full of platitudes, that it is something that is significantly moving us forward. The 3 points I want to point out on this, and I want to thank Supervisor Kennedy and Supervisor and Mayor Steinberg for going in great detail. But one, it helps us not duplicate efforts. It helps us avoid these duplication of contracts, competing against our staff itself, avoiding situations where we're going after the same grants and resources to affect the same areas. Not only is the city within the county, but many times we have many council districts and areas where on one side of the street is county, on one side of the city, one side of the street is the city. It helps us make sure that we're most effective with limited tax dollars, limited dollars that we have to a very large problem. And whether they're state or federal or local, they're still tax dollars that our neighbors want us to be the most effective with this. It helps us have coordinated access in a way that we're making sure we're signing up as many people to the full service partnership program. And again, by not signing up as many people to the FSP, full service partnership, we're leaving money on the table that we desperately need here. It makes sure that we recognize that FSP, that partnership, also pays for housing. And if we're not signing up folks to be able to do that, then we're not addressing the bigger piece as well. It helps us make sure that we're thinking about all of the bigger pieces, so that that every state and federal dollar is going to help, again, affect our business, support our businesses, support our neighborhoods, but most importantly, the people who need those services by the FSP. It recognizes in there as well that we have more to do. We have to look and recognize that we need sobering centers in our county. That helps us with the people who are affected by substance abuse. It helps us in the work that our law enforcement is trying to do responsibly. And it also recognizes our joint effort on housing and making sure that the city commits to moving forward on building more permanent supportive housing so that that money that when we collect FSP can go to and be used in that appropriate way. Second, the legally binding partnership agreement, again, requires every 6 months a sense of accountability, that there will be a joint report, not one message over another, joint communication, an agreed upon report by both the city and the county to its boards about where we are on progress. Because if we're not showing accountability to the public and showing progress, then this is just paper that we're printing on. That in itself is legally in there. And finally, it has a dispute resolution process, not for us to compete against each other, but for us to work through our challenges and to figure out ways how we look at process improvement and not pointing fingers at one another. One, I have full confidence that our county and our council partner, colleagues, elected partners, will vote on these partnership agreements to help us move together. We are asking them, obviously, to vote in support in this, but more importantly, I'm proud of the work that this 4x2 has done to say that we want to make sure that there is a very strong, publicly visible, and committed way of making a change in our city. I'm excited about the outcomes that it has for us. I'm excited about making sure that we make relief for our neighborhoods and making sure that we, as Sacramento, when I say that, Sacramento as a region is an example for our state. We have more work to do, and I know this will help us get there. With that, I want to welcome my colleague here who has been involved in this even before also I came on to council, Sacramento City Council member Jeff Harris.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. Well, they left me to bad cleanup. I happen to do pretty good in that role. There are 2 points that I don't think have been discussed, but I would also like to thank our city and county staffs. They've all been called out. And to our city manager and county executive, this was a tough agreement to reach. You know, make no mistake about it. It took a lot of effort from all of the 4x2 and staff. I think our city attorney's office played a very significant role, as did Lisa Travis at the county. So Susan Alcala-Wood has been named, but Bo Parkhurst hasn't. And, you know, he was a significant player as well. The fact of the matter is that we can reach an agreement, but it has to be legal. It has to work within the legal framework under which we find ourselves these days. Under Martin v. Boise and many other laws that have been imposed on our region, we have to find the tools to work within that legal framework, and I'd like to delineate a couple of them. So coordinated access was alluded to. It's an idea that Supervisor Desmond and I brought back from Haven for Hope in San Antonio. What it does is bring all of our service providers and our outreach teams together with one central database so that everybody who's encountered on the street, we will collect that information. We'll be able to use those data points to be much more effective in dealing with the homeless population. We'll know who we're talking to, what medications they need, what drugs they're addicted to. If they have been offered services in the past, if they've refused them, we'll know how many touches that we've had with those individuals. All of those data points are exceedingly helpful in helping us solve the individual issues. The fact of the matter is, what we're facing is a massive behavioral health crisis. And that's what we're up against. Without strong data, we can't get there. So I'm very pleased that the city and the county and the continuum of care are jointly funding the coordinated access program, because it's really going to help us on the ground, on the street, to meet people where they are in their life and help move them along. We know that oftentimes the first encounter does not work for a homeless individual. Sacramento steps forward. Ryan Lufborough used to say it takes 10 touches before you start making real progress. And I think that's why Mayor Steinberg talks about these outreach teams and and really protracted continual outreach until we can get there and meet people with their needs squarely on the street. Which brings me to tool number 2. It started as the Shore Center, which we started at the city. The Substance Use Respite and Engagement Center, it's actually became so popular, it evolved into the Crisis Receiving Behavioral Health Center, which I think is a more appropriate name. We've served over 3,000 people in the last year and a half, or 3,000 overnight beds to help people come down off of drugs, which is very often the front porch or the first step to get people to the place where they can even think about accepting services. So we've taken it right down to the basics here. We know that drug addiction is a massive problem in our city and our county, that it affects a very high percentage of homeless individuals. And so now we have a tool to meet it head on. It's becoming very popular. It's getting state recognition. There's going to be more money available, and I'm exceedingly happy that the county is embracing the CRIB program. Thank you very much for that. And that supervisors are actually asking to have a CRIB center in their jurisdictions. This is tremendous. Look, I've been on the council for 8 years. When I campaigned for council, I said homelessness was the biggest problem that we have facing the city. I was right, and in all this time, I have been hoping for and reaching for collaboration with the county. I was on the original 2x2s with the county, and Supervisor Cerna and Kennedy and Steve Hansen. We talked about these issues, endlessly, trying to reach little points of agreement. But this is an historic agreement. This is a real, true collaborative effort between the city and the county, and it has been much needed for all the years that I've been here. Lastly, I'd like to say this. Enforcement is a tool that we also have to pay attention to. There are areas that are simply not tenable to have encampments around critical infrastructure. And we've adopted ordinance, to not have encampments within 500-foot radius of schools, of daycare centers. These things make sense. And also we need to protect our levees. As chair of our flood control agency for years, we must protect this critical infrastructure. So enforcement is a piece of the puzzle, and we can't take our eye off of that. But it's a creative balance. And this agreement brings that balance into equilibrium in a way that it never has been in the past. I'm greatly heartened by this. I thank everybody who has worked on this problem, and I agree with Mayor Steinberg. This is turning a page. This is a new way to do it. It's not going to clean up our streets tomorrow, but it gives us a collaborative effort with the tools that we've delineated here to really make a concerted, humane approach to dealing with homelessness. So here we are. It's a great day, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Patrick?
I want to thank all of my colleagues for being here. You can see what 6 elected officials can do to make a press conference last as long as possible. You should imagine what they can do to make negotiations last as long as possible. But it's all worked quite well. As we know, there is no silver bullet to solving homelessness, but what we've done here is provide a whole lot of buckshot. And we're on our way to really making a difference for our community. I thank my colleagues again. I thank all of the staff that's been involved with this and all of our community partners. And with that, we will be available, both the members of the council, the members of the board, and more importantly, the staff who have the real answers will be available for your questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I heard you list off about 600 beds in your comments. Can you all break down how many of those beds are included in the existing or approved beds, and how many beds will be new?
I will turn that to Ann Edwards to get the right answer.
So they will all be new beds. Some of them are underway at this time in terms of planning, but none of them are in existence right now. So it will be 600 additional beds.
Okay, and is the Watt Avenue 250 beds included?
Yes.
Okay. And the Florin Road the Florin Road tiny homes?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So for the city, the new.
Yes.
What about, can you speak about any of the funding? I know in Metro it talked about budget surplus being a part of how you would when you would provide more beds. Can you talk about any of the funding and how much of that's coming through, and any possible deficit that the city is looking at that the city manager has previously talked about?
We, Measure O has a limitation on the amount of general fund resources that the city is obligated to expend. But remember, we don't start from scratch here. The city is at 1,100 beds already, funded by a variety of sources. The county, of course, has its number of beds, I believe, in 4 figures as well. And we intend, and you're going to have to really work out our budgets to do everything that we can to keep those 1,100 beds. But as I said earlier, one of the philosophies behind all of this, I think both the city and county, is that we both recognize we can't do this alone, and that we're much more powerful together. The county can speak to its own budget. I just know that there is this brand new opportunity because of the state reform known as CalAIM, which allows the county to draw down significant federal dollars, engaging the health plans in serving this population. And in fact, under the agreement, 15 of the outreach workers are going to be funded by the health plans themselves through CalAIM. So this is really a multi-party agreement, if you will. It's the city, county, but it's also the health plans.
Can I add on to that?
Go, please.
So I'd like to add on that with Measure O, there are no funding limitations to this partnership agreement. So you're talking more about Measure O, and what you're referring to is the unobligated general fund surplus. So think of it as this way. That $5 million is the floor. We fully intend to do more than that, and we're already on our way to do that.
I want to go back to, I think, a couple points that everybody's mentioned here, but it's, if we're not doing everything we can on the coordinated side to maximize drawing down federal dollars, the expectation of new dollars, I think, is short-sighted. So the first thing that this partnership agreement does, again, is making sure that we're capturing as many people as we can in the FSP, so we're not leaving money on the table that is not within our own general fund already.
Question for whoever wants it. The most recent point-in-time count by Sacramento County earlier this year identified more than 9,000 people who were experiencing homelessness. Obviously, I mean, the city and the county both have a certain existing number of beds, which I think is like 2,200, and then you're talking about adding another 600. But that still leaves more than 6,000 people on the streets. What are you going to do about it?
I'll go first. First of all, you look at a 200 bed count, and that's not going to serve 200 people over the course of the year. It's going to be multiplied many, many times, because the key is, if we're getting people into these shelters and we're warehousing them, we've failed. The key is to get them in there, get them hooked up with the services that they need to be successful, and find them more permanent and stable housing, and move them out of there as quickly as possible and fill that bed again. I'll give you an example. There's a shelter that the county funds. It's actually in the city of Sacramento, that's operated by the Salvation Army. There's 60 beds there. Now, 60 beds sounds like a drop in the bucket, and we're going to draw off of the parkway for those beds. Sounds like a very small number when you're talking about the magnitude that we're talking about. But 60 for 3 years, they have a record of getting people out of there within 9 months. Within 90 days. A record of 90 days. So if you do 60 beds times 90 days for 3 years, you're talking about 1,000 beds roughly. So don't take the 600 number and think we're serving 600 people. It's going to be far more than that.
The other thing I just would say is that, again, the engagement piece out in the encampments, in the field, is so important. Not only for the reasons that Supervisor Kennedy just said, the idea is to create flow-through, but beyond that, there's also creativity. There's also, reuniting people with their families, for example. There can be roommate opportunity. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we can do. There are vacancies throughout, Sacramento, not enough of them. But the idea of having the will and the obligation to actually be out there and to have to serve the people one way or the other means that we're going to find solutions for people. We have to. That's the intent of this. Yeah.
So I mentioned coordinated access. I think a really powerful aspect of that is that our outreach teams and our service providers will know exactly what housing stock is available on any given day just by looking at an iPad. Right now, many service providers have to make up to 16 calls to find out, is there a shelter bed available? You know, it's just duplicative effort. It's cumbersome. Coordinated access, I believe, will be a very valuable tool in using our housing stock to great efficacy as well.
I have a question for the county. Just wondering with the behavioral health workers, are those going to be new workers? Where are you going to find them? I understand there's a shortage of that type of worker. Also, just wondering on the substance use disorder treatment beds, about how many are you estimating will be funded?
I'm going to let Ms. Katari answer the how many substance abuse treatment beds, but in terms of the behavioral health workers that we spoke of, those will be new staff. A few of them have already been hired, and we are continuing to recruit and hire. It's taking longer than we would like, but we have been able to hire some people, and we will continue a significant effort in that vein.
Thank you. In terms of substance use residential treatment beds, we're actually looking over time to add about 500 new beds to meet the demands on our continuum of care. And so the Board of Supervisors recently approved a $10 million investment for our providers to be able to build that capacity, and we're hoping to move the needle on those beds, and we'll continue to look at what else we need to do to continue to add those beds. Thank you.
What time frame are you looking at?
As soon as possible. So the money, the $10 million, is about to go out the door now, and hopefully our providers will be able to ramp up very quickly. Thanks.
What is the checks and balances of the on-the-spot diagnosis to ensure accuracy? And secondly, with New York City's plan kind of in the spotlight right now, how are we ensuring ethical treatment?
So the emphasis, the priority is on proactive, voluntary engagement. That's always the philosophy. That's the philosophy of Prop 63, the Mental Health Services Act, and of all of the systems, both public and private. You engage people, and as Jeff Harris said, it can take 10 touches, right? Because it's a trust-building process here, especially with somebody who's traumatized because of their underlying health condition or just the experience of living on the streets. Laura's Law and the other involuntary commitment tools exist as a last resort, and for people who are not amenable to even the most extensive assertive outreach to come on in on a voluntary basis. So we want to, I think we all believe that living on the streets is not good for anybody. It's unhealthy. It's unsafe. People are victimized all the time. And so you start with voluntary and mean it. That's why when I say people, that engagement teams may be out in these encampments for a month or more, depending on the size of and the severity of the problems in the encampments for the people. But ultimately, you need to have all those tools, and the county has them, and they're obligating themselves under the agreement to use every tool possible to help get the people off the streets where it's cold, wet, and not safe or healthy. Go.
I'd like to add to that. One of the questions was, how do we ensure that the diagnosis in the field is accurate? So we will have behavioral health specialists in the field doing that. However, once someone has been assessed for eligibility and diagnostic criteria, they are then referred to either a full service partnership or another program within the community where they get a fuller, more comprehensive diagnostic assessment to ensure that we're treating them in the right place at the right time in the right way.
And so just kind of building on that, if someone, these teams encounter a person diagnosed on, let's say, schizophrenia, how would they go about getting the medication? Like, which steps are there for them to actually get the pills?
So the folks in the field won't be doing that. So what happens in the field is they get an assessment, and if they're not already linked to a behavioral health provider, they get linked to a behavioral health provider, and we will make sure that they get to that appointment, and then they will see a psychiatrist, because only a psychiatrist can prescribe them proper medications. Unless, of course, they are so impaired in the moment and meet 5150 criteria as a danger to themselves or others, then they would go to the hospital and get treated right away.
They'll get driven to the place that can have a psychiatrist.
Yes.
That's why we're gonna have 50 outreach workers, you know, because there's gonna be the need for transportation. and those
So
sorts of
all-
things.
A couple parts of this question. First, when do you see those engagement teams being deployed? How soon?
Next week,
Next week? And
the
so-
two of them.
Two of them as
teams.
soon as next week?
Yes.
Yeah.
At that point, you say these teams are going to be within these communities until they're able to navigate people out. How confident are you and that their outreach is going to match up with the availability of places to put people? We know that we were talking about a lot of beds coming, the 600 beds coming online, but we also know that there's been significant delays in getting that out there. We're talking about one project that's months behind, another project announced expected to take more than a year to come online. So realistically, if these navigators are able to get people into a place, is there a place for them?
So you're right, the 600 beds are going to take some time to get in place, but we do have beds now. And as we talked about earlier, there's the goal of these beds is to get people into a shelter, stabilize, into treatment, and then into housing. So beds do become available fairly routinely. We also offer motel vouchers to folks if they have an immediate emergent need and there isn't a shelter bed available. The Board of Supervisors recently approved $10 million for a landlord engagement program that really works to help folks find, and we will help them, find a landlord that will take a rental subsidy. So there's more available than just the shelter beds that we've been talking about.
So are you confident that at this point, when those teams deploy, I think it was in a week, that the availability of some option will match up to the need?
Very likely. I can't say that every single person, there's going to be something every single time, but we will work diligently to ensure that there is a place for folks to go. And as we also mentioned earlier, that engagement takes some time. Next week, going out together, it's very unlikely that we'll have someone say, yeah, I want to go inside today. So we will continue that engagement process and continue to work to find them a safe place to stay.
You've got these teams going out next week. How realistic is it that the people of Sacramento will see change soon?
Well, they're not going to see change next week. I mean, this does in fact take time. I think what you're going to see is that the partnership between the city and the county working together in these teams, that engagement will be more effective, and over time you will see a difference.
Okay, a couple more questions. Is everyone good? What does legally binding mean?
It means legally binding. It means, it means that we are contracting with each other to follow through on what we have agreed to. That's what it means. It's not, I guess the distinction would be a statement of principles or an aspiration. One of the reasons why the negotiation took maybe longer is because we really got down to specifics. And the specifics matter, because the intent has always been there, but actually negotiating the details and binding ourselves legally to one another to follow through is very, very important.
So who holds
That's
you
what it
guys
means.
accountable to follow through on this if it's a legal binding agreement between you and the county? Who's holding you?
Well, the public, you, and rightfully so, and all the providers, the homeless population itself, the business community, the neighborhoods, and as somebody said, we're going to report back regularly. I know the teams are already working on a transparent communications tool that shows where the next encampments are. All that, we're heightening the communication and the transparency, and so we're accountable. But I do think the question you asked Ann Edwards earlier is it's important to reiterate. It's I think important, and I've learned this, to overperform and not overpromise and then come up short, right? It's important to have vision and aspiration and all that. And so my view of this is the guy that always sets the big stretch goal here is that this is going to take some time. It is. This is a culture shift. And it is going to take some time. And I don't know that the public is going to see the results right away, but what they are going to see is active engagement in an average of 10 encampments a month. That in and of itself is going to make a difference. But here's, not to end on a negative, but here's the one thing we cannot prevent. And where we need help from the federal government, for example, we've got 6,000 people on our tenant assistance waiting list, right? So we get people off the streets, and the county is, by the way, engaged in the same thing. We get people off the streets, and we're going to, in large numbers. Oh my God, we have to do everything we can to prevent the next cohort of people from becoming homeless, because then we will help a lot of people, but the public will continue to be frustrated. So we have many challenges, but I'm telling you, better together, greater chance together that we can achieve the result that the public wants. Thank you.
Sounds like you're skeptical about affordable housing then, once you get the people off the streets.
This is not a magic wand. Affordable housing, the county's doing a lot more in affordable housing. We just put $35 million into almost 3,000 additional units. I mean, we're all we know that's a big part of the equation. This is a foundation and a major one.
If I could just real quickly, everybody looks at everything as either or in this situation, and it's not. We have to get people off the street as quickly as possible, get them stabilized, get them the help they need, get them the support they need in order to make them able to provide for themselves and live in a stable environment. We have to do that. That's critical. At the same time, we can't take our eye off the ball on what's incredibly important, and that's affordable housing. And both the city and the county are engaged in doing both of those things, as they like to say, chewing gum and walking at the same time.
Rich does.
I'm gonna have one more thing. Thank you. I was gonna use that line. See the mentorship from Supervisor Kennedy for me. But I want to say, there's a focus on this agreement. This agreement is about the county's commitment to doing certain things to support in the City of Sacramento, to support the City of Sacramento, working vis-a-vis the City of Sacramento. It is certainly not a reflection of everything that's going on. There is an awful lot more that our respective jurisdictions are doing independently, together, and a lot of those revolve around permanent supportive housing, interim housing, and the county, at least when the Board of Supervisors, I know the mayor mentioned how many millions that the city has committed. At the Board of Supervisors, we're doing the same thing. So I want to make sure that you don't walk away from here thinking that the four corners of this agreement encapsulates everything, because it certainly doesn't. So.
And
that's another press conference.
the last thing on that, it can't be just on that issue. I mean, the issues that are affecting people who fall into homelessness or in these situations, they're affected by other issues of access to transportation and then our regional housing challenges. It isn't just about how much we're building within the city. And I do want to recognize how SACOG most recently funded a project, and both Supervisor Kennedy is in our district, which is the San Juan Motel, for the cost of infrastructure. Many of our areas where we want to actually build a permanent supportive housing, affordable housing, the cost of sewer or water infrastructure on itself it prevents us from even getting to building a door up. So I think it's, again, incumbent upon all of our systems to be thinking about in this format how we are better coordinated in our effort to do that. And by having an entity like SACOG and even just the city and county, that's how we'll make a real effort in the overall impact in our region. So.
Okay,
Thank you,
thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I was like choking. I was like, all of a sudden, I was like,
Yeah.